r/askreddit. What is the most wholesome thing you have seen? Was headed to Oakland from San Francisco through the tube. Trains packed as always. People on BART are good about public transit etiquette in general during commute hours, so nobody's talking or listening to music or anything. When we leave the tube onto the viaduct over the port, one guy answers his phone. Hello. Yeah. Oh my god. What hospital? Okay, I'll be there as soon as I can. He hangs up and just looks super distraught. Someone taps him on the shoulder and says my car is parked at West Oakland. Do you need a ride? He agrees and they get off together. Little gesture, but it was uplifting to see someone volunteer for a stranger like that. Slightly less wholesome, but I've always thought a motorcycle Uber would be good for in really busy cities when you need to get somewhere fast. Businessman late for a meeting in London? Here's a helmet. Sign this waiver. We can filter past all the traffic. Gran is dying and you need to get there now? Helmet, waiver, hold on tight. This is nice. Faith in humanity restored. People on BART are good about public transit etiquette in general during commute hours. You and I have had different experiences, it seems. When I was a preschool teacher, we had one kid who was our certified cheer-upper. If someone was crying, she'd get a tissue, walk over, carefully blot their eyes and make them blow their nose. All while saying, "It's okay, you're okay." Eventually they'd stop crying, she'd take their hand and they'd go play. She was a little angel. I was playing with my 6-year-old nephew and pretending to cry really dramatically, and his 2-year-old brother yells "oh no" from the other room, comes running and repeating "oh no" as he runs, and starts patting my cheeks and dabbing at my eyes with his shirt saying "you okay?" Such a sweet kiddo. What a sweetheart. Makes me wonder how she was raised and how wonderful her own parents, hopefully, are too. This sounds like my daughter. My daughter is on the spectrum, but she is very loving and likes to give hugs. She just has a sixth sense about her when someone really needs that hug. One of her daycare workers had just found out her cancer had returned. She hadn't told a soul at the school yet. My daughter just walked up to her and said, "I think you need a hug," and gave her one. She still does that to this day. The child is clueless on so much, can't pick up sarcasm at all, but boy she is in tune emotionally to people. I feel like this is Betty White's origin story. My last week of high school, our lunch lady gave out small gifts to some of the seniors. Just the kids that took the time to chat with her that she got to know more personally. I received a sketchbook with a sweet good luck note in it. I was always in art club and was going to school for fine arts. So she took the time to get all of us a gift that was specific to US. This lady saw hundreds of kids a day and still took the efforts to get to know us. Lunch ladies are the best. I bonded with one in my high school and she would always tell me about her day and was always excited to see me. She was like a really cool aunt. This next year is my senior year, and the thing I'm most excited for is seeing this one lunch lady and listening to her stories about her grandson again. A little boy at the airport kept trying to climb over a concrete divider that had active traffic on the other side. His mom was loaded with luggage and kept trying to stop him, but didn't have free hands. My brother-in-law walked up and said, "Hey kid, there's a rule here. You have to keep one foot on the ground at all times. Look around. Everyone has at least one foot on the ground." The kid kept trying to climb, but with one foot firmly glued to the ground he wasn't in danger anymore. Such a creative and wholesome way to let the kid keep playing while keeping him safe. I'm so using in the future. Thanks for that. As a parent, drop the luggage and tell him you need his help and hand him a little bag so he feels needed and stays with you. I was on what I call a rumpled suit flight. One of those flights on a Friday at 6 from NY to DC where most of the flight consists of business people in suits drinking $14 double whiskers. A fellow rumpled suit sat across the aisle from me next to a mother and her kid. When she could, the kid brought down her tray table and a coloring book and started coloring. I didn't hear what was said, but at some point the kid handed the rumpled suit a coloring book and they spent the remainder of the flight coloring and chatting. I was kinda like, I want to color too. I was on a flight about a month ago and there was a kid next to me with a bunch of Pokemon cards. This was after Sword and Shield was announced, so I asked him if he was excited for the new game. His eyes lit up immediately and he started geeking out and showing me all his favorite Pokemon. I told him my favorite game was Emerald and he said he never got to play it. I have a GBA emulator on my phone with a ROM of it, so I'll let him play it the rest of the flight. The joy of a child is absolutely beautiful. You should have said so. I bet it would have made that kid's day. I read a story once about a woman whose father had died before her wedding and his organs were donated. The man who received his heart walked her down the aisle. Oh my god, that's so sweet. I thought you were going to say the bride walked down the aisle with her dad's heart in a box. When I was, like, 11, Dad was driving us to a gathering at my grandma's. There was a woman pulled over on the side of the road. Dad asked if they needed help. She said she'd run out of gas. Dad told her he would get some. So we go into a gas station. Dad explains the situation to the cashier and is prepared to buy a can of gas. There's this other customer that looks like a biker, big dude with tattoos and piercings, who tells Dad he has gas at his house and tells us to get in our cars and follow him. His wife and young son were in the front yard. Turned out this was his sister's house. The guy had fled a hurricane with his family. Nevertheless, he insisted on giving us the gas for free. That's very kind. We ran out of fuel on a family holiday, but we weren't that far from the next town, so my dad gets a jerrycan and starts walking. He returned with a full can in the back of a ute driven by some young men who had picked him up, driven him to the service station and driven him back to us even though it was out of their way. Why would you go to some stranger's house to get gas when you're at a gas station? A friend and I were talking and she said shit in front of the kid of another friend. I dismissed it by saying she probably knows worse. We asked what was the worst word she knows. She very carefully looked around just in case her parents were around and whispered selfish. Geez. I asked my 6-year-old son what was the worst word he knew. He responded that would probably be cunt. My brother was driving with my niece in the back in her child seat. He was half listening to sports radio, looking for the freeway on ramp. He heard her say. He said the S word. He thought, what? How does she know about the S word? She's too little. Instead, he very calmly asked, what's the S word? She whispered, stupid. I have 2 nieces. At little one's birthday her friend gave her 2 unicorn toys. She immediately looks at Big Sis with a huge smile. Look, Big Sis. This one for you. We can both play. She was genuinely so excited to play unicorns with her sister and it never even occurred to her that T didn't need to give one to her. My heart grew 3 sizes that day. What a lovely child. Seeing my 4-year-old nephew share his peanut butter sandwich with his friend at the playground. Edit. Thank you stranger for my first gold. Like, when do they learn this, or how do you teach one that early? It's amazing. Plot twist: his friend is allergic to peanuts, and he successfully killed his arch nemesis. When I first had foster children placed with me after bedtime, my pit bull would go into each room and check on the kids and then sleep in the hallway. If any woke crying in the night, she would crawl into bed with them. That is so precious. My dog, ATLB Wolfhound Mix Goof, loves to hop into bed with me and lays across my chest while he wags his tail and licks my face. Then when I say time for bed, he stretches out and puts his back against me. Then he sighs and the snoring begins. 3. I just shed tears of joy. This makes me happy. I gifted a used electric wheelchair to a family who couldn't afford one. The kid, maybe 14 years old, was kinda grumpy looking when he arrived, didn't say much. Once we got him in the chair and he was zooming around, he was all smiles. His mother was also super happy. I heard the next day he told his sister to clear off the driveway so he could practice with it, and by the weekend he had gone to a fair. Edit. Bit more background. I had a nurse doing some care at the time. I got a new wheelchair and was looking for somewhere to donate my old one. She mentioned this kid she knew and made the arrangements. Oh man, I read that last bit as, and by the weekend, he had gone too far. Good idea. It avoids the whole situation where if you give to most charities, the money gets eaten up in administrative costs. I was in the local supermarket doing my shopping. I was pushing my cart in the frozen food section when I came across a young woman in her 20s, I'm estimating. Her little girl, I think around 2 years old, was sitting in the cart she was pushing. She was beautifully cooing to her little girl, "I love you. I love you," among other sweet things and sounds. Now, I never met this young lady. I never talked to her. Just watched her treat her daughter very sweetly with all the love in the world. It was the most nicest thing to see and experience because my own upbringing was a living hell. My parents broke up when I was young, around 5-6 years old. Mother got custody of us kids and she was a mentally ill, abusive, psychotic monster. I never knew a scene like that in my own life. All I got from my mother is daily yelling, screaming, cursing, nagging, and hitting. On more than one occasion she told me to my face how she wished I was never born. I just knew, with a kind, loving mother like that in her life, that little girl was going to grow up into a nice, normal, happy human being. Having a mother like that makes all the difference in the world. Have a big hug. I hope you are not overwhelmed by your feelings when you have to take notice of what you never had. My dad and I were at a stoplight a few blocks away from a grocery store and a homeless man was sitting on the curb. I would have given him some money, but the road was pretty busy. I watched a guy with 2 huge bags of groceries walk up the street and give them to the homeless man. It was such a kind gesture I almost cried right there in the car. Seriously, I know just what you mean. Seeing someone do a kindness like that gives me tears every time. Or, that's really cool. If anyone feels inspired by this and wants to do something similar, shelf-stable food is best. Maybe 1 or 2 fresh foods for same-day consumption but nothing frozen or refrigerated. Staples are great and important for nutrition but can get boring if that's all you're eating, so maybe throw in a snack cake or a bag of chips as a treat. If you get canned goods, go for ones with pop-off lids in case they don't have a can opener. And always be respectful. My 2-year-old nephew giving his 4-month-old sister, my niece, kisses constantly. He won't give anyone else kisses but her. He can barely even speak but clearly already loves his baby sister. It's so adorable. Me nephew has been doing the same thing, but to his cousin. He's 1.5, she's 3 months. Then, when he finishes and we all go, or when he gets so excited that his whole body trembles. It's so precious. Bit of a backstory. My pregnancy had been difficult and I was worried for my unborn child. A 20-week scan showed it was looking like my baby had a birth defect but we would only know the full extent when he was born. Being in a vulnerable state, I was looking for hope. As is the case with these things, I turned to woo. I bought a large crystal necklace, it was a beast of a thing, and put all hopes that this would save my baby. My husband is not the spiritual type and told me up front that it was a pile of nonsense shit but if it made me happy to wear the thing. It might as well have been attached to my skin. That thing never came off. Moving along to the birth. I had to be induced as the baby wasn't moving. After being poked and prodded with all sorts, I finally was in labor. Slowly things took a turn for the worse. This baby wasn't going to come out smoothly. He was in distress and he needed out immediately. Before I knew it, I was about to go into surgery for an emergency C-section. I was told I had to take off all my jewelry. In a haze, I took off the crystal and handed it to me husband. I'm being wheeled away to surgery and all I can see is the look of fear on my husband's face as he slowly put on the necklace. That moment has never left me. Thankfully my child was born healthy and the defect wasn't life-threatening. He is now turning 3 and my life couldn't be further away from that moment but it still gets me in the feels. Edit, spelling. I am not a spiritual man either. But I have learned the power of such things is more from the faith you put into them. Oh my god, that is so sweet. Yesterday at work my boss' 5-year-old daughter was drawing a picture for me and said this is you, a princess, and I thought my heart would combust because that was just so sweet. She proceeded to make a little collection of drawings, which she folded into a book, and gave it to me. It was all hearts and rainbows. That was just absolutely wholesome and made me appreciate little kids. Made my day, to be honest. This is more heard than seen, but I was spending the night at my mom's house for Christmas. Her birthday is on the 25th and we usually go to a movie for it, so it was just easier for me to spend the night so we could go out the next day. Anyway, it's about 2 AM and I'm outside having a cigarette when suddenly I hear one of the neighbors yelling, "What are you doing outside? Get your ass back in." Immediately after I hear a kid yell and protest, followed by, "Dad, I just wanted to see Santa land on the roof." This kid snuck out of bed and out of the house at 2 in the morning when it was probably like 20 outside, just so he could see Santa. It was really adorable, and also pretty hilarious. My parents always told me that Santa won't come down the chimney with presents unless I'm asleep. So, I would sneak out of bed and sleep on the floor near the fireplace hoping that I'd wake up when he arrived. I always awoke in my own bed assuming Santa saw me sleeping and took me to my room. Good guy, that Santa. I had a teacher in high school who had a reputation as being the super tough mean, older African American lady. She taught health class. There was a mandatory CPR class that we had to pay for, and there was no way I could pay for anything in those days. CPR day came, and she told me to go with the other students. I gave her a confused look to which she replied, "You're good baby," and she had paid for me. Later in the year, I fell asleep in her class. It was a home game day, basketball, and she told me to lay back down after the bell had rung. It was the last period of the day. She told me she'd wake me up before I had to report to the gym. She dimmed the lights and played some light jazz while she did her work at the computer. I hadn't been sleeping well at home and I'm guessing she knew. I woke up when she brought the lights back up and she handed me one of her cup of soups she had warmed up. We never really spoke much, but she had my back and I made sure she knew I had hers. The most wholesome. On senior night, they introduce the players and say some stuff about them as they walk to center court, typically with parents arm in arm. When it was almost my time to walk, she saw that I was alone. Bless her heart, she about fell down from her seat running towards me. She put her arm through mine and just looked forward, chin up proud as hell as they read my stats grades etc. I remember that walk and how I wish I had a picture or recording from that day showing how big I must have been smiling. My friends' mothers had tears in their eyes. They made sure to invite me to dinner with them after the game and I made sure it was okay that I brought my teacher. She politely declined and just told me she was proud of me. After I had graduated and was a bit better on my feet, I returned to visit her. It was honestly the only thing that could get me back in that place. Each time I'd bring flowers and or food and made sure to do it in front of students and made sure they knew to respect her. Only story so far that has made me tear up. If I had a gold, you'd get it. When my youngest was 2/3 he slept in bed with me. I woke up one night to him not there. I panicked and looked around. He was laying and sleeping cuddled next to my oldest son. This is so sweet. Usually older children don't like being with the younger ones. So, this is so cute. Source: I am the oldest sibling. I'm a record producer. On a particular song the client wanted a child's voice to open it, so the bassist's 10-year-old son came and recorded a vocal part. Once we rapped, the singer said to the kid, "Musicians get paid," and he handed the kid a £20 note. The bassist then did the same. A small gesture maybe, but in our world making a living is hard and it was amazing to see professionals showing how it ought to be. Hey Macklemore, can we go thrift shopping? I imagine that was this kid. In Austin, Texas, my family and I went to a breakfast place. The food was good, the waiters and waitresses were amazing. But they messed up our order. They were short on staff, apparently. Someone had either quit or got fired, and another person had called out that day, so it was only a few people. And it also happened to be one of the busiest times of the week. So, my mother went to go to the bathroom, and when she came out, she noticed our waitress standing at the corner. She was about to cry, or was already crying. I had been waiting and looking out for her the whole time, so I was able to see this. My mother noticed her high stress levels and asked if she had wanted a hug. The waitress nodded and said yay. My mom opened her arms and brought the waitress into a hug to comfort her. And once the waitress had calmed down enough, my mother came back to the table after making sure she was alright and told us what happened. I feel lucky to have my mother in my life. I love her so much. Oh my god, I'm crying. I miss my mom. She's in heaven. Please hug your beautiful mom from me. Thank you so much for sharing, dear. My oldest son, he was just getting the way he could sit up well and bend over set back up all on his own. My wife was in the shower. I had him on the bed. I noticed he started pulling at a pillow, so I pulled it over in front of him. He laid face down on it for a second. I thought, wow, he must be tired, and just before I grabbed him he sat back up and smiled the biggest gummy grin ever. Then he did it again. And again. Then it suddenly hit me. He is playing peekaboo, so he did it another time, and when he sat up I said peekaboo and he laughed and smiled. I'm a fairly rigid guy that doesn't get emotional or worked up about much, but that broke me down and lifted my spirits all at the same time. One time I saw my elderly neighbor bring out a saucer of milk for a stray kitten. My dog was barking at it when she noticed it, so she went inside and came back with a little dish to lead it away from the sidewalk. It was all very cute and heartwarming. Wasn't me, but my grandfather, who was in the military, told me a story on how his friend in Vietnam made food, toys, and helped this community from the Viet Cong, pushing the community down south more and more until he was shot twice in the chest and once in the head. My grandfather took his friend's dog tags to give back to his family. After his family refused them back, he kept them, still has them to this day. Why did his family refuse his friend's dog tags? When one of my family members was suffering from depression and wouldn't come inside or talk to any of our family, my neighbor, and my family member's best friend, just sat next to him on the curb outside for 2 hours to keep him company. I have done this for drunk veteran. Although he was sat on a railway viaduct, I saw him up there, so I sat next to him for about an hour. He started talking and I listened for half an hour or so, then the police showed up, so I left them to it. I saw a police officer stop traffic to help a turtle safely cross a very busy intersection. He stopped his car, picked up the turtle and moved it to a marsh on the other side of the 4-lane intersection. My son, 18 months old, trying desperately to reach his brother's, 11 months, high chair, pulling him over as close as they can get and sharing his smoothly pouch with him, then patting him on the head. Both laughed and giggled. The world's not all bad, folks. It just looks like it if you're only looking in always dark places. Edit, 18 not 16 months. Anything Mr. Rogers and I cry every time. That man was an angel. Also, once my mom was hanging with a friend of hers who just had a baby, and the baby was crying real bad. Mom took the baby and sung to him like she did with me when I was young. He calmed down and went to sleep immediately. The friend was like, I sing to him and it doesn't work. I wish I had your voice. I always get the shivers when I see a very dedicated parent. A few months ago I was on the train on my way to work when a mother entered with her approximately 10-year-old daughter, who was in a wheelchair. The girl would do nothing but talk, ask questions and narrate everything she did, leaving almost no chance for anyone, her mother, to participate in the conversation. I felt bad for the child, because it seemed as it was impossible for her to keep a thought to herself, yet whatever she said ended up as a monologue. Her mother had very calm, pleasant and patient vibes. Not once did she judge or interrupt her daughter while I was present. Whenever her daughter asked a question, she would answer it, not getting irritated by the fact that the girl would continue talking. Maybe she was listening after all. At times, the mother would encourage her daughter to elaborate certain thoughts, and sometimes the girl did. Edit, spelling. So my mom is like a walking charity that can essentially do no harm. She has her flaws, but she does her best. Anywho, this is a story on how she shares things. Just this week, we were at the supermarket and she saw we had forgotten our plastic reusable bags, so I went to get them. When I came back and gave them to her, she took out 2 of the more expensive ones and gave them to this lady that was with her kid, and TBH, how she did it was so nice. She saw she didn't have the budget to buy the bags, I guess, so she just gave them to her. And the lady was so grateful. Another time, she gave away a pendant to a girl with Down syndrome that I'm sure was expensive. I don't keep track of what she buys, but it was on the expensive side of the box that day, and the girl was so happy. I was sitting in a bar having a beer after work when this guy comes in and orders some shots. After the first couple, he starts low-key crying. A semi-regular old man sitting near him asked what was up. Turns out his girlfriend split up with him and he wasn't taking it well. Old man asks to join him for a drink. New guy agrees. This old man, named Keith, always drank 2 beers, paid, and left. Anyways, they sat there and got absolutely shithammered drunk. They tried every liquor in the place and really tied one on. Keith was going on and on about how he hasn't let loose since he was stationed on Okinawa. By this point, new guy has completely forgotten about his ex-girlfriend. They both made each other's evening. Next time I saw Keith, I asked him how the night went. He said he hadn't had a hangover like that since Okinawa. The new guy became a semi-regular and joined our little bar family. He eventually hooked up with a new girl, and I believe they're still seeing each other. Unfortunately he moved, so I haven't seen him in like 6 months. I have bipolar disorder. Sometimes it can get scary. One day, I flew into a rage over nothing. I was screaming as loud as I could and punching pillows. I'm responsible, and my dog, who is not a trained therapy dog, came over to me with his head bent low, laid in my lap, and kissed me until I calmed down. He is my angel. There's a couple who look like they have to be in their 80s I see almost every Saturday morning when I go to the mall to run my errands. They walk around together holding hands. My dad, who's generally pretty reserved and serious, has a huge soft spot for my dog. I hear him talking to her all the time when he thinks no one's listening. My favorite is when it storms and my dog gets all scared and upset. My dad comforts her by saying, "Oh, it's okay woofers, it's just a little dibble dops." Makes me melt. A father leaving a restaurant with his 2 daughters. They walked out the door and the girls headed right while he headed left. He called them back by saying, "Car is over here, butterflies." Just before they get into the car, one girl complained how bright the sun was and he said, without missing a beat, "Just like your futures." My great-grandmother's last words were asking my grandmother what was the name of that ginger boy she liked so much, me. And when she told her, my great-grandmother said, "Oh, that was it, I loved him so much." Right before Dean, she was revived once with those electric things, but after that they didn't try to do it again. At a concert I saw a buddy walking with his friend who was blind and also somewhat physically disabled. I overheard him telling his blind friend, "Oh man, I was so smashed last night. I couldn't walk or see nothing. Thank God for you and your cane. You were steering us everywhere like a champ. I would have been helpless without you." It was really so heartwarming, and you could see how much it meant to his friend to be told how he was the helper, not the person being helped. I'm assuming he was being a little hyperbolic, but the amount of joy I saw brought to his friend's face from his kind words was so heartwarming. My dad going all mushy over my parents' little Chiweenie. They have 3 dogs, but Hershey, the smallest, is hands down his favorite. He gives her belly rubs and massages and even baby talks to her. It's absolutely adorable. Uncle Ira and his tea shop. I'm from Europe and did a semester abroad in the States. Last month of the semester my girlfriend and I traveled the West Coast. LA, San Francisco, Grand Canyon. Before we went back to San Diego we went to Las Vegas a couple nights. We had our pillows, sheets and stuff back from the apartment in our car in case we needed to sleep in it. Last day we went to the famous Las Vegas sign to take a picture and there were a couple homeless people sitting around. We decided to ask one of them if he wants our pillows and sheets. He was very happy and we threw in a couple of snacks. Cookies and soda. When we went back to the car and drove past him we saw him sitting with another homeless person sharing the snacks. I don't know why, but seeing him, who doesn't have much, sitting there and enjoying and sharing this with his bud made us happy. I think my girlfriend nearly cried. I often think back about it and hope we made his and his buddy's day a bit better. I was waiting for a ride on the streets by my apartment complex. I was there maybe 5 minutes and I saw the dad teaching his small son how to ride a bike, and at the park across the street where I was standing, a dad and his 2 kids were playing with a baseball and a bat. It made me really happy to see these families doing stuff together. There's this big buff bodybuilder type guy who works at the gas station near my house. I was in a hurry so I had to buy cat food from that gas station. As he was ringing up he starts gushing about owning 2 cats. It was so precious.